subscribe our channel. If you like our video, please share it with your friends. You can also click the bell icon to get the notifications.
Australians speak English, of course. But for many tourists and even some locals, Australian English has only tenuous links with mother tongue. Our speech is prepared with words and phrases whose arcane meanings are understood only by the initiate. It is these colourful colloquialisms that Australian slang set to truly explain. Australia has one of the world's most important mining industries. It is a major exporter of coal, iron ore, gold and copper, and is self-sufficient in all minerals bar petroleum. Since the first discoveries, the coal in 1798, mineral production has risen every year. In the decade to 1992 it doubled. But on May 3, a couple of weeks later, Lincoln issued an executive order calling for 43,000 three-year volunteers for the Army, and also increasing the size of the regular Army and Navy by 40,000 men. Both of these actions were in apparent violation of the Constitution. The Royal Institution is an organization that has been around for 209 years. Many of the people that have worked here have been scientists themselves, including Michael Faraday. He made the discoveries that made generating and using electricity much easier, making it possible for us all to switch on lights, cook our dinner, play games consoles much, much more. Certainly one of the important values of literature is that it nourishes our emotional lives. An effective literary work may seem to speak directly to us, especially if we are ripe for it. The inner life that good writers reveal in their characters often gives us glimpses of some portion of ourselves. We can be moved to laugh, cry, tremble, dream, ponder, shriek, or rage with a character by simply turning the page instead of turning our lives upside down. The audio, which includes more than 1,000 separate data files, was captured in the early 1970s by the late Hetty Van der Rate. She recorded the various screams, barks, and howls made by a group of chimps, including 17 youngsters, living in the Gombe National Park in Tanzania. Charlie Chaplin and his brother Sidney were placed in an orphanage at a very early age. Becoming a vaudeville performer, he joined Fred Karno's company in 1906. He made his film debut in Making a Living, 1914, and introduced the famous seedy and soft-hearted gentleman tramp routine, which became his hallmark. Numerous films for various studios brought him world fame, all based on his mastery of pathos and slapstick acrobatics. English colonies emerged along the eastern seaboard for a variety of reasons. People, primarily men, originally migrated to Virginia to find gold and silver to make a quick profit. After it became evident that there were no precious metals in the area, men came to Virginia to start A study found that the research funded by the soft drinks industry had different results from research funded by other sources, and went on to suggest that they may have been biased by the research itself. The whole point of the scientific methods is to ensure the research results are not influenced by the source of funding. In ancient Athens, a boy was socially located by his family identity, and Plato often refers to his characters in terms of their paternal and fraternal relationships. Socrates was not a family man and saw himself as the son of his mother, who was apparently a midwife. In 1861, Matthew Brady, a well-known portrait photographer, approached President Lincoln requesting permission to move freely around the country photographing the Civil War. Lincoln granted him permission to travel anywhere with the Union armies, and his record of this conflict brought home to millions the horrors of war. Nell says that, in order to seek protection from their furry foes, birds actually prefer to build their nests in plots of swamp with a resident alligator. In fact, in one study a graduate student planted fake alligators. The birds seem to prefer to build nests close to them. Where there's a water source, there are alligators, so it's sort of this mode of protection around these colonies. The speaker reminisces about his views of the English Revolution when he was a student and how it seemed quite clear which side he was on, the aristocrats, not the Puritans. Later he realized there was more to it than that, and there were several ways of interpreting the revolution, as a struggle between the king and parliament, as a class war, or as an unpredictable situation without clear sides. Having the same dream again and again is a well-known phenomenon. Nearly two-thirds of the population report having recurring dreams. Being chased, finding yourself naked in a public place or in the middle of a natural disaster, losing your teeth, or forgetting to go to class for an entire semester are typical recurring scenarios in these dreams. Current research models indicate that climate change associated with increasing levels of greenhouse gases is likely to lead to the soils in the interiors of the major continents drying out. In response to a drying of cropland, people are likely to seek either new sources of irrigation water or new, wetter areas to farm. If we choose desalination of seawater as a possible solution, large amounts of energy will be required. points. Today, however, Skinner's errors are forcing the skeptics to think again. Backed by billionaire techies such as Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates, schools around the world are using new software to personalize learning. This could help hundreds of millions of children stuck in dismal classes, but only if edtech boosters can resist the temptation to revive harmful ideas about how children learn. To succeed, edtech must be at the service of teaching, not the other way around. Since the Soviet Union successfully launched the first man-made satellite, Sputnik 1, in 1957, about 5,000 more satellites have been put into orbit around the Earth. About 2,000 of these are active, and although the rest are now dysfunctional, they remain in orbit, together with parts from all the rockets that carried them there. These remnants are often referred to as space junk, space trash, or orbital debris. Housing fulfills the basic needs that people have for security, privacy, and shelter. While the adequacy of housing is an important component of individual well-being, housing also has great impact on the nation's economy, with its influence on investment levels, interest rates, building activity, and employment. NASA confirms thousands of massive, ancient volcanic eruptions on Mars. Scientists found evidence that a region of northern Mars called Arabia Terra experienced thousands of super-eruptions, the biggest volcanic eruptions known, over a 500 million year period. Smoke from Australia's Black Summer bushfires of 2019 to 2020, which burnt through 18 million hectares of land, produced a phytoplankton bloom larger than the entire country of Australia located in the Southern Ocean. Many families are fleeing their native countries due to sectarian repression and political uprisings. Consequently, thousands of people have been stranded in foreign lands for months. Other families have gone missing in the sea, marooned in small boats, as the neighboring foreign countries refuse to take them in. Do something you are very passionate about and do not try to chase what is considered the hot passion of the day. People say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing, and it's totally true. You have to do it over a sustained period of time. So, if you don't love it, you're going to give up. Everyone at some point can feel worried or anxious, homesick or isolated because they don't just fit in. This often happens when you change your location or when changes happen to you, and the truth is that this happens to lots of people, and it's a normal part of life. It's been recognized that around 1/3 of students will experience poor mental health during their studies. We all know that too much information can be a bad thing. This is as true in daily life as it is in business. Filtering useful from useless information has become a growing problem, bringing confusion with it, but this is where data curation can help. Curating data involves finding and displaying patterns in large volumes of disconnected and messy data to create meaningful information. Invaders, pirates, warriors. The history books taught us that Vikings were brutal predators who traveled by sea from Scandinavia to pillage and raid their way across Europe and beyond. Now cutting-edge DNA sequencing of more than 400 Viking skeletons from archaeological sites scattered across Europe and Greenland will rewrite the history book. Peer checking is a very useful and productive way of developing your reviewing skills. When you read your friend's work, you are assuming the role of the reader and the teacher. If your friend's work is well written, then it will be fluent and easy to read, and you will have no problems understanding the overall content. Reserve requirements are the proportions of the deposits that banks must keep on hand and are not allowed to lend out. For example, if the reserve requirement is 10% and you deposit $100 in a bank, the bank can lend $90 of that $100 to someone else, but it is not allowed to lend the remaining $10. Finally, the experimenters examined real insects to see if leg adhesion might also play a role in the walking coordination of real flies. They put polymer drops on the flies' legs to cover their claws and adhesive pads as if the flies were wearing boots and watched what happened. The flies quickly began to use bipod-like leg coordination similar to the one discovered in the simulation. As a child, you might dream one day of becoming an astronaut and, the next day, of becoming a ballet dancer. The possibilities are endless. Eventually, this wealth of choice is whittled down by external circumstances and internal interests. Similarly, precursor cells in early embryos make a series of stepwise decisions governed by external forces and internal factors to generate the diverse array of cell types present in adult organisms. From a child's point of view, what is the purpose of TV advertising? Is advertising on TV done to give actors the opportunity to take a rest or practice their lines? Or is it done to make people buy things? Furthermore, is the main difference between programs and commercials that commercials are for real, whereas programs are not, or that programs are for kids and commercials for adults? History is selective. What history books tell us about the past is not everything that happened, but what historians have selected. They cannot put in everything. Choices have to be made. Choices must similarly be made about which aspects of the past should be formally taught to the next generation in the shape of school history lessons. An economic depression is a period of sustained, long-term downturn in economic activity in one or more economies. It is more severe than a recession, which is a slowdown in economic activity over the course of a normal business cycle. Economic depressions are characterized by their length, and by abnormally large increases in unemployment rate. The Southerners did not accept Lincoln as a president because of certain reasons, based on historical grounds. Southerners wished to protect their rights in the government and become more independent from the North. They considered president elections to be unfair. Moreover, they thought that their own rights will be ignored and limited. All this caused the separation of the Southern states and marked the beginning of the Civil War. Over time a split would have appeared in wolf populations, he says, those wolves that feared humans, and those that didn't. So this would have facilitated, I think, the domestication process. At which point humans deliberately took wolves as pets. But that domestication process, France says, may have happened more than once, first in the West, in Europe, and again in the Far East, in Asia. As we progress into the 21st century, communications are becoming faster and faster. Think of the millions of different media images you are bombarded with every day. It is as important now to be able to read and make sense of those images, as it has been to be able to read ordinary text. As introverts are thinking, they reach back into long-term memory to locate information. An introvert will often compare old and new experiences when making a decision, which slows the processing down, but leads to carefully thought-out decisions. This means that introverts have an active dialogue with themselves and usually walk around with many thoughts in their minds. Nell and his colleagues took to the Everglades at night, hunting for gators near and far from nests. You have to use a spotlight and you see the little demon eyes shining out of the marsh. They lassoed the gators, pulled them into the airboat, and took blood samples and body measurements. Tasmania is a large and relatively sparsely populated island off the south coast of Australia. The island is of particular interest to natural scientists, who go there to research the unique wildlife. Tasmania has, for example, 12 species of bird that are not found anywhere else in the world. Points. London's National Portrait Gallery is currently celebrating the 50-year career of photographer Sandra Lusada. The 21 portraits on display depict key figures in literature, film and fashion from the early 1960s. Subsequent to the acquisition of 40 portraits by Lusada, the display at the National Portrait Gallery highlights shots taken between 1960 and 1964, many of which feature in Lusada's book Public Faces Private Places, 2008. Formal commissioned portraits are shown alongside behind-the-scenes photographs taken on film sets and unguarded portraits of sitters captured at home. participating regularly in physical activity has been shown to benefit an individual's health and well-being. Regular physical activity is important in reducing the risk of chronic diseases, such as heart disease and stroke, obesity, diabetes and some forms of cancer. The National Physical Activity Guidelines for Adults recommends at least 30 minutes of moderate-intensity physical activity, preferably every day of the week, to obtain health benefits. Biology is the natural science that studies life and living organisms, including their physical structure, chemical processes, physiological mechanisms and evolution. Certain unifying concepts consolidate it into a single and coherent field that recognizes genes as the basic unit of heredity, and evolution as the engine that propels the creation and points. Sir Charles Spencer Chaplin was an English comic actor, filmmaker, and composer who rose to fame in the era of silent film. He became a worldwide icon through his screen persona, the Tramp, and is considered one of the most important figures in the history of the film industry. His career spanned more than 75 years, from childhood in the Victorian era until a year before his death in 1977. And encompassed both adulation and controversy. It is precisely in observing the intertwinings of success and failure that Chasing the Flame makes its greatest mark. With piercing insight and relentless logic, it reveals the pitfalls of international politics and details an intricate struggle between individual and institution. It haunts us with the poignant truth that even a great man can do only so much to reinvent the world. Deaf children learning a sign language could certainly pursue the development of listening and spoken language skills if desired, and doing so would carry much less risk knowing the child would have mastery in at least one language. If a child does this not succeed in mastering either a spoken language or a sign language, we must then ask how much benefit the child derived from interventions in each language relative to the amount of time and resources dedicated to those interventions. Today, telecommunication is widespread and devices that assist the progress are common in many parts of the world. There is also a vast array of networks that connect these devices, including computer, telephone and cable networks. Computer communication across the Internet, such as email and instant messaging, is just one of many examples of telecommunication. A thesis is a claim that you can argue for or against. It should be something that you can present persuasively and clearly in the scope of your paper, so keep in mind the page count. If possible, your thesis should be somewhat original. It was found that while many companies express interest in Jacobson's use case approach, actual scenario usage often falls outside what is described in textbooks and standard methodologies. Users therefore face significant scenario management problems not yet addressed adequately in theory or practice, and are demanding solutions to these problems. If countries can specialize in certain goods, they can benefit from economies of scale and lower average cost. This is especially true in the industry with high fixed costs or that require a high level of investment. The benefits of the economy of scale will ultimately lead to lower prices for consumers and greater efficiency for exporting firms. Before the discovery of Australia, people in the Old World were convinced that all swans were white, an unassailable belief as it seemed completely confirmed by empirical evidence. The sighting of the first black swan might have been an interesting surprise for a few scientists, but that is not where the significance of the story lies. The Atlantic coast of the peninsula can be thought of as the cold side, and the sea on this coast tends to be clear and cold, with a variety of seaweeds growing along the rocky shoreline. On a hot day, however, this cold water can be very refreshing and is said to be less hospitable to sharks, which prefer warmer waters.